Welcome to part 2 of our series on building apps with the Microsoft Identity Platform. Today we'll be talking about the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which helps you unlock the data in Microsoft 365 for your apps. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sydney Andrews to teach us all about it.
All right, thanks, Matt. Welcome to the second part of our four-part series on developing JavaScript applications with the Microsoft Identity Platform. Today, we're going to talk about the Graph Toolkit, one of my favorite new tools that you probably never heard of, but are going to immediately want to use as soon as you see. It's a really great way for you to add Microsoft Graph integration to your JavaScript applications without adding a ton of additional code. Today's going to be a really demo-heavy session, so before we get started, I always like to do just a little bit of housekeeping just to make sure everybody has some resources both before and after this session. So I'm Sydney Andrews. I'm an Azure MVP. I've been developing on the Azure platform for many years now. I'm going to be leading you through this session today and the remaining sessions in this series. I'm going to try and answer questions at the Q&A panel as we go throughout the session, but I'm only human, so I may miss a question or I may give you an answer that doesn't work out in the real world. We try our best to answer questions. Sometimes, right away, sometimes it can take a while because we have to research the answer. But if you have any questions after this series or as a follow-up to this series, msusdev@microsoft.com. Once again, that's msusdev@microsoft.com. Email us there. We will help you and try to get you answers to your questions. Also wanted to call out that all of the source code for all of the sessions in the series are already posted online. That's github.com/msusdev. Microsoft_identity_platform_dev. And we usually post that link in the Q&A too, but just remind everybody, I think Matt's already posted it. GitHub.com, msusdev, Microsoft Identity Platform Dev is where all of the slides and source code for today's demos are located. I say that because we don't have that many slides. Want to talk about where we are, what we're going to try and do today, and then we'll just jump headfirst into demos. So this is the second part of a four-part series. In our last session, we talked about authenticating users in your JavaScript applications. We did authentication manually, and we also did it using the mstyle.js library. Now, one of the cool things about this is that we have these users there authenticated, and we're able to go to the graph to collect data about the users. And today, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit more about that. And we'll continue to talk more about the graph as we get into session 4 of our series. We'll also talk about mstyle.js a little bit deeper in session 3 of our series when we use mstyle.js to connect to other Azure services. But today, the highlight today is that we're going to use the Graph Toolkit, which is a set of components that you can either use in vanilla HTML or with libraries such as React to integrate graph features into your application, again, without having to write a ton of manual code. Now, these are highly customizable, interchangeable toolkit components, so I think you're really going to enjoy them once you see them. So let's talk about what I'm going to try and do today. We're going to talk about the Microsoft Graph. We'll look at the documentation for Microsoft Graph, and we'll even go look at the Microsoft Graph Explorer. From there, we'll go to the Graph Toolkit playground or sandbox, where you can go learn how to use the Graph Toolkit, learn how to customize it, learn the different components and how they integrate into your application. Once we've explored the Graph and Toolkit using both the Explorers and Sandboxes, we will implement the Graph Toolkit first using a vanilla JavaScript application, and then we'll do the same thing with a React application. So that's really it for my slides. I want to just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and exit my slides, and I have, Visual Studio Code open now, which we'll use later. But what I'd like to do is start with a empty browser window, and I'm going to go to docs.microsoft.com/graph. That's again docs.microsoft.com/graph. I'm going to go ahead and post that in the Q&A. Now, docs.com/graph takes us to the Microsoft Graph landing page, where we can learn about what Microsoft Graph is as a concept and the different components of the graph, tools that we can use, SDKs to connect to it, which we'll explore much deeper in the last session of the series, and then the toolkit if we want to integrate with it right away. But I like to just start with the what is the Microsoft Graph documentation page. And I'm purposefully showing you the documentation page while I'm walking through everything so that you can go in and say, oh, okay, I need to answer more questions or dig in deeper. One of the things we find is that with Microsoft 365, we have so much intelligence there. And that's just not just raw data, but actual actions and things we can do. So a lot of people think of Microsoft 365 and they think about the data there, all the emails that my company has, or the messages we send in Teams, or maybe the files we have on OneDrive, but they don't think about some of the other intelligence of Microsoft 365, some of the smart AI-driven technology that's integrated in the 365 platform. They don't even think about the actions, like for instance, the ability to start a Teams call, or the ability to send an email, or the ability to create a Microsoft Planner plan is all part of Microsoft 365. So when we talk about the Microsoft Graph, we're really talking about a API interface to interact with all of the intelligence of Microsoft 365. And so that includes the data, the actions we could perform, and any enriched information that Microsoft 365 has. And we can integrate that into our own applications, whether they're device-based applications, web applications, our own bots, server-side apps, whether there's stuff running in our data center or stuff running in the cloud. The idea here is that we can build our own experience on top of the richness of Microsoft 365. And so you'll find the Microsoft Graph really is this kind of web of things you can do and things you can look up. And that becomes really interesting because now we essentially have an API for all this data that our organization is already invested in, our organization is already built out in a very organic way. You don't have to tell users, go use your email. They use it anyways. You don't have to tell users to go have Teams meetings. They use it anyways. And then things that in the past might require a custom library or custom SDK, all of a sudden becomes available to you because this is a single API service that covers all of the Microsoft 365. So for example, if somebody asked me 5 or 6 years ago, okay, we need to track how many times we're using conference room A in our organization in a virtual team meeting, because I'd like to justify spending X amount of dollars on upgrading to a really high-end teleconferencing solution. Well, that would be either very manual or very, very difficult to program in the past. But with the Microsoft Graph, I can just go to Teams and use the API interface for Teams to look up calls that were made. I can go to Outlook and look at meetings that were booked in that conference room or location and be able to correlate that data and use it in a very intelligent way to justify a business decision. So I always like to really start with that explanation what the graph is. It's basically an API over all this stuff you're already using, so that you can get that data and do something with it. Now, they have this really cool tool. It's called the Graph Explorer. Go ahead and put the link to it in our Q&A. That's aka.ms/GE for the Microsoft Graph Explorer. And the Microsoft Graph Explorer is essentially a tool for you to start exploring. I hate to reuse the verb, but exploring, jumping around, looking at the graph and getting accustomed to it. So when you go to the Graph Explorer, you'll notice it is asking me, do I want to sign in? I'm not going to sign in yet because they give you a sample user that you can use to play around with the graph until you are ready to sign in and see your real data. So with this sample user, they give some getting started queries, just some really simple things that you can run, again, as you're getting accustomed to what we're doing here. So let's zoom out a little bit so you can see it a little better. So we have a My Profile query right here, and it gets the profile information for this user. So this fictional user, Megan Bowen, who's an auditor, has an office location, surname, user principal name, which is their alias, all sorts of information that would be interesting to us. We can get this person's picture. We can look up mail, and I'm going to jump back and explain how all of this is working in a second, but just showing like real quick with the graph, I can go look up their emails. I can go look up items in OneDrive, items that are trending. So this user doesn't have any, but if there's, sometimes you log on Office 365 and they talk about documents that are trending, you can look that up. We can look up direct reports, managers, things like that, all sorts of cool stuff. Now, a couple questions usually come in right by now. Oh, if you have this API, can't anybody just go look up anything for anyone? No, not exactly. See, with the graph, you got a couple things going on. Right now, this fictional user, I'm pseudo logged as this fictional user. This fictional user has given permission for the graph to given permission to retrieve this data from the graph. Now, when I log as myself, if I haven't given permission in the past, I will need to give the Graph Explorer application permission to access my information. So when I first access my profile photo, it's permission using the user.read scope. And for those who are not unfamiliar with that term, we talked about scopes and permissions a little bit in our first session. If you haven't seen that, that's on youtube.com, Microsoft Dev Radio. Things like if I want to see what's in OneDrive, giving permissions to access files.read or files.readall or read-write, any of those will give me permissions to read what's in my OneDrive. I can go to sites.readall for, I believe it's SharePoint sites to see what items are trending. I can go access the directory using directory appropriate permissions, or I can use my Microsoft Task permissions to access Microsoft Task items. So this is not free for all. A user can grant an application permissions to read their data, or an administrator can give application permissions to read more than one user's data. So the idea here is that there's still a great level of control. This is not, again, a free for all. We can read anything from anywhere. So speaking of that, let's actually log in as myself. I'm going to hit sign into Graph Explorer. I'll sign into my account connected to Windows. And I can see that if I go to my photo, it gets a picture of my photo. Now, where does it get this information from? Well, remember I told you the graph is essentially an API. So it's at graph.microsoft.com. There's versioning on the graph. So we're at version 1.0. We're going to the relative path, me, photo, $value, which gets the raw value of my photo. If I removed $value, just went to me photo, it would actually give me a JSON object with information about the photo, but not the actual raw data of the photo. If I just went to me, it would actually get my profile information. So version 1.0/me, there's my profile information with my email and job title and stuff like that. I'm not going to click my mail or any of those other things. I've already given it permission. We don't really want to go do that, but I can look at like maybe my to-do task list. Let's run that query and see I have different tasks within Microsoft Tasks. So it gets really fun. We can start doing all sorts of things. We can go to OneDrive and look at files. We can go to Microsoft Planner, look at all the planner plans associated with me. I can get a specific plan. So let's see. I have default list. Let's just try that. And I see that did I paste in the wrong ID? Let's go back to my list of plans. Get all planner plans associated with a group. Oh, all my planner tasks. I apologize about that. So I don't have any planner tasks. I clicked the wrong thing. I apologize about that. But that usually I have some tasks I set up ahead of time, but I didn't really do that. I did them in Microsoft To Do instead of Microsoft Planner. All right, so one of the things you might have noticed is that on the right-hand side, we have this button called Toolkit Component. So if I look at my profile information, if I select Toolkit Component, it'll show me a visual toolkit item. Now, this is using the fictional user, so you get it. That's perfectly fine. We want to use that. That corresponds with the query I just made. So the equivalent calling graphmicrosoft.com version 1.0/me is to use this Microsoft Graph Toolkit component. If I wanted to get this user's, I'm going to, just for fun, I'm going to go back to the set. Let's see, aka.ms. Go back to the Graph Explorer where I'm not signed in, or let's see, let me sign out. aka.ms/ge. There we go. All right, so I'm back to using the sample count. If I wanted to see the sample counts mail, right? But wanted to see as a toolkit component, like for instance, a toolkit component to see their photo or to see their profile information, or to get all the items in a OneDrive. I believe it's here. And get Outlook events for the next week. You notice I have all these really cool UI things that I haven't done anything with. And that's because the Microsoft Graph Toolkit is a set of React, and you can use it with vanilla JavaScript too, components that allows you to build out UI that looks like it's native to Microsoft 365 without having to write a lot of custom code. So what I like to do is actually dig into the Microsoft Graph Toolkit next. So I'm going to just jump back to that docs.microsoft.com/graph page. We clicked on what is Microsoft Graph earlier. Let's scroll down and click on Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Now, this is a breakdown with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, but basically it's framework agnostic components. We're going to demo them in vanilla JavaScript and React, but they can be used across a variety of different frameworks. But the idea here is that we should be able to add things like a login button, an agenda, a profile picture, or maybe a user card like you see in tools like Outlook, without having to, again, write a whole bunch of custom things. However, the components are completely customizable. So if we want to customize them, like for instance, we want to take advantage of the Graph Toolkit to load data, but we want to render it in a special way, we can do that too. So there's all sorts of breakdowns how things work. So for instance, if I'm using a Graph Toolkit and I'm in SharePoint, I can use SharePoint as my Graph Toolkit provider. Or if I'm just using just vanilla JavaScript and I'm gonna log in manually, I can use MSAL too. And that's what we're gonna focus on today. If we're building a Teams app, we use a Teams provider. All sorts of ways we can use the Graph Toolkit. So if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a button that's called Try Out These Components in the Playground. Now, what that's going to take you to is mgt.dev. I'm going to put this in Q&A, mgt.dev. mgt.dev is the Microsoft Graph Toolkit Playground. This is where you can go in and learn how to use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So I'm going to start with something really simple, a login button, mgt login. Now, if the user is not signed in, they're going to see a blank here and the button sign in or log in. If they are signed in, they'll see their profile picture, user information, and then the option to sign out. So this doesn't do anything because I'm in the playground. Oh, actually it does. That's an update. Usually it doesn't do anything. But I can go in, have the user sign in, sign out, all that good stuff. Now, because we're in the playground, it does automatically for me, but normally you'll see the pop-up and the whole 9 yards as if you're logging in to any other application that's in Azure Active Directory. Now, based upon that, we could go to different components. Like, for instance, if we wanted to get a person, we could go to the MGT or Microsoft Graph Toolkit person component. Now, this gives us a profile picture in a circle, the username, and then their email or alias. Now, let's talk about what's actually going on in this component on the right-hand side. We have the MGT person component. It has two properties, person query, which in this example is me. We can make this query something else. So for example, if we're in a Graph Explorer, we have our query me. We could go and see me/manager. We should get the manager. I haven't tried this before. I'm doing this demo in real time. We just make sure I got that right. Me/manager. I didn't quite work out. This is what happens when I try to do a demo completely off the cuff. So normally what you do for person query is you actually put in the URL, relative URL to get to that person. So if you're like me and I was trying to do something cool and I completely bombed it, how do I find out what these Graph Toolkit components do? Well, if I go to the documentation, there's a documentation section called components where we can go in and research it. And I know it looks like super smooth. Oh, he must have made that mistake on purpose because he's a showman. No, I totally completely forgot how to set person query for a second. So I'll go look. Here's an example. Person query is me. It says, hey, you can manually set person's details using JavaScript. Or if you're using a person query, you can search for person Microsoft Graph and fetch their information. So it gives you examples of CSS, a person card, component configuration, set permissions for Microsoft Graph, caching, authentication, all sorts of really cool things. So let's talk about these properties. So there's all sorts of cool things here. Like for instance, you have view. You can do avatar, 1 line, 2 line. I think there's one called 3 lines. You can change the properties. So for example, right now it's display name and mail and job title. We can change that to I don't know. Let's try that. Display name and mail. So line 1 property, line 2 property. Let's see what that does. So right now, line 1 property is display name. Line 2 property equals job title. Ha! Very cool, right? So let's see if I got that to work. Didn't work. We can set line 2 property to display name. Line 1 property equals, let's go back and look at the documentation. Mail. Mail. Very cool. I can put in a 3 lines breakdown. And there we go. We have our email, our name, and our job title. We can mix it all up. I'll just go back to the default here. We got 3 lines. We have 1 line view. We have an avatar view. And again, all of this stuff is stuff that I just glanced over at the documentation that you saw me look up in real time. I try to do that on purpose a little bit so you can see, like, this is the process I go to if I want to customize these components. Now, I can, again, set this person's details using JavaScript. Now, the way we do that is we remove the person query, right? And I'm going to just go back to the 2 lines view. That works for me. And I'm going to go ahead and set a property. So the easiest way to do that is to just go in and say the ID of this component is person target. So if I got this right, I should be able to go to JavaScript and say const person equals document.query selector person target. So just a simple JavaScript to reference the element. Then I'm going to set properties of it. Person.person details. And again, this is just vanilla JavaScript, so this should just work super fine. Display name. Webinar presenter. Mail. msusdev at Microsoft.com. Remember, msusdev at Microsoft.com. You got any questions, right? Job title. JavaScript and MSAL. Now remember, our view is 2 lines, but if we change our view to let's say 3 lines, we'll see that job title, or we could just do line 2 property equals job title. View equals 2 lines. There we go. So lots of ways we could customize this component, but we're just getting started. This is just customizing some properties, but as you notice, we didn't really do much beyond just take a property, make it a little bit nicer. We could do a whole lot more. We have different components like our agenda component, which has a list of items. We have components such as our file list that gets a list of files. We have a file component, so if you wanted to show 1 file or 2 files, we could do that. Right now, you see this query, me drive items. It has an item ID. I mean, I could just go to the Graph Explorer and see, okay, for this fictional user, if I go to all the items that this user drive, they have a lot of stuff like folders and stuff like that. Here's a business data folder. There's this unique ID. So me drive items, make sure I get that correct. Copy the ID completely and not miss a letter. So the query is me drive items and the item ID. Let me try that. Drive items, the item ID, or run that query. And I get the metadata about this business data folder. If I put that here to this Graph Toolkit component, there's our business data folder. So again, really cool stuff that we can customize. But I feel like we could do more. So there's one component called MGT-get. What does MGT-get do? Well, MGT-get will look up a resource and send an HTTP GET request, and then allow you to template what to show when it's loading, what to show if there's an error, and then what to show if you're successful. So this is the component that allows you, this is pretty much the skeleton key of components, right? So we go in, right now it's going to be messages. And if you remember from when I showed the Graph Explorer before, go to me messages, it gets email. And it has all sorts of properties like, has attachments, subject, body preview. It has some other properties that are really interesting. You'll see here this template that's using all those properties. So for instance, it creates a div, a data for, so it's kind of enumerating with these divs for email and value. So each iteration, the property, it's kind of like a for each C#. So for each item and value, we'll create a variable called email. We'll use that in the template. So we print email.subject. We set information about email.sender. Notice we're actually putting MGT person component in here. So we get nice little person component. Right now, it's just a one-line display, but we can make it an avatar. And if you hover over it, it shows that person's profile. We can make it 2 lines. Pretty cool. And right now, this is read-only. But we can also use this. We can use the graph to do things like mark it an email as read. We can use the graph to do really cool things like I'll just show you in a sec. Here we go, Outlook mail. We can send mail, forward email, all sorts of actions on top of just reading this data, right? But I want to take this and take it a step further. So what else could I search for? So we have email messages. Maybe I want to look at my to-do list items. Or you know what? Items in my OneDrive. So we have me, drive, root, children will be the name of the query. So me, drive, root, children. For the scopes, I need files.read. So scopes files.read. And instead of every email value, I'll just do something as simple as for every file and value, like a little for each loop here. And then there's all sorts of stuff here, but what do I care about? There's a name property. There's a folder, whether it's a folder or not. Let's do name and created date time. So I'll do 2 properties. H1 file.name, H1, or close my H1 tag. Let's try that. There's my, okay. And then in a P tag, or paragraph tag, I will put, let's see, created date time. I'm not formatting it. I just want to show you. Like, this is what it looks like when we're building our own templates. So notice I'm not actually writing the code to create a graph here. That's already done for me. I'm just building a template. And right now, I'm just building a template using just some raw HTML. But I mean, we can pull down a Bootstrap maybe, right? Get started with Bootstrap. We'll copy the CSS, pop that in up here. Yeah, we have Bootstrap CSS. Let's do Bootstrap components. Let's do a list group. So we have a list group here. List group. I like the list groups with badges. There we go. List groups with badges. So it recommends creating a UL class list group to wrap everything. So we'll do that. UL class list group. Like that. And then within there, we'll have LIs with all this stuff, which I am not going to memorize. So I'm going to copy that. So LI. For those classes, I'll close the LI down here. Within that LI, we have just our title, so file.name. I don't need to make it H3. It's perfectly fine. And then at the end, we have a span with a whole bunch of classes. And I'm just for fun, I'm just copy and pasting here. So I created a list group with the created date time. I mean, I'm doing created date time. It can be last modified date time. I can even put modified. I mean, all sorts of stuff. So right out the box, I just using the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, create a component that creates items within the root of my OneDrive. and list out their names and when was the last time they were modified. Real quick, real easy, real fun stuff. Let's do a harder one. So we have the Graph Explorer. One of the things you notice, I showed my photo before. Now, we did this by going to me photo $value, and that gets the raw data for your photo. If you just went to me photo, it will get a JSON object with metadata about your photo. But today we'll just go me photo $value, right? So if I copy me photo $value, and I'm just going to remove some of this other stuff. I'm going to make this MGT get way simpler. So MGT get, well, resource. Not worried about version, scopes, all that other stuff. But I do notice a special property called type. If it's not raw JSON data, you got to tell it what type of data it is. Here it's an image. So I just should be able to build a template, a resource to, let's start with a me photo value. I can go in and say image source equals image. This is the image data. And there's my photo image. Just by using this MGT get component, I can add some CSS. And I'm not going to bore you with the details here. I'm just going to create a border style solid, a black border, 5 pixels wide, 35% radius, and a box shadow, just to make it kind of fancy. If I didn't want to do that, I could just go in and maybe say, instead of data type image, maybe I'll just query me photo. And then for the template, I could just print out this. And this will print out the JSON object. I mean, just for fun. I'll put it in a code element. Just for grins and giggles. There we go. We have our code item. We see this has a height, width, a media E tag. The media E tag lets us know if it has been changed, help prevent optimistic occurrence errors. A content type. This is a JPEG image. And all sorts of other metadata is super interesting to us. And remembering that if we want to actually get the value of it, we'll put $value. So pretty cool stuff. Let's actually look at something that's editable. So we're going to go in and we're going to pull the MGT task component. This is a component that allows us to see a list of tasks, add a new task to the list, mark them as done, all sorts of cool stuff. But and this is a sample user, so I can't actually edit it. But if I was, dealing with a real user, I'd be able to edit this. Now, we could make it read-only. We just do read-only here. MGT task read-only, and we have a read-only version of this. How do I know that? Well, I can go down to the components and see that there's components for people picker, to-do tasks. I can see under properties that there's a read-only property, there's a hide header, a hide options property, all sorts of cool stuff here. Now, I can also template this. So let's start with a template, data type equals task. So we'll create a template for an individual task. Now, for this template, I start off just putting the raw data in, which is our just, JSON object. It has all sorts of interesting things in here. We have a title, group title, folder title. That's a part of each JSON object. If I'm not sure, I could go to Graph Explorer and I could just go to me and I believe it's just me to do sorry. I could go to me to-do list to get different tasks. I go to documentation page and see how to manipulate this. Let's play around with that. So read only. Let's take it a step further. It's template data type equals task. Template. We have an H1. We'll put in our task.title here in H1. And I showed you how to see it in JSON, but if you go here, you'll see that you have CSS variables, all sorts of other things you can configure for this template. Let's make this a little bit more fun. So, all right, task.title. My data type's wrong. It's task singular. Okay, there we go. I believe I'm gonna hide the header. All right. Now, from here, I'm going to add a paragraph element, or p tag. and task.group title. What does that give me? Okay, maybe I'll do a vertical line or vertical line strong task.folder title. Which folder is this task in? Whether it's on track or to do, all sorts of folders. So, using this templated engine, I can pretty much really customize tasks and really customize this component. So this is the mgt.dev experience, but what I want to do, and I'm going to spend the rest of today working through this, is actually implementing this using vanilla JavaScript and React. And I'm going to try to do something really simple so that you can repeat this and recreate this yourself. So let's look at the package on npm. So npmjs.com, we're going to search for @Microsoft/mgt. Now, Microsoft/mgt is going to take us to the Microsoft Graph Toolkit components. Like we can just go in here and see that we have the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, lots of information about providers, components, a really cool getting started page that walks you through some of the very first things you can do with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So, lots of really cool stuff. Let's actually try to implement this. So, going to open up Visual Studio Code, and just for everyone's benefit, normally I would build this from scratch, but we actually already created a sample application for you. So we'll just go back to my browser and go to github.com, msusdev, example static JS app. You probably see this a couple times before, but I'll put a URL in the Q&A for anybody who hasn't seen it. And this is essentially a static JavaScript web application. Let's clone it. So I'm gonna go ahead and clone it to my local folder, git clone, paste in that URL, and then hit period to clone to my current folder. I already have this folder open in Visual Studio Code, and it's really just an HTML file, a JavaScript file that doesn't do much, and a package.json file. And I'm just gonna, it uses HTTP server, but I wanna have some fun. Instead of HTTP server, we are going to npm install live server, save def. So we're gonna install live server. It's cool because live server is one of those ones where it allows you to just go in and change stuff on the fly. I'm going to delete this HTTP server and switch up HTTP server with live server. Cool. I'm going to delete this index.js file. We're not going to need it for this demo. So if I got everything right, what I should be able to do is just do npm starts live server, and it will start at port 8080. One cool thing I will call out, if you're using Azure Active Directory, you have an application registration, it does matter what you put there. Excuse me. So if you put localhost or 8080 or 127.0.0.1 8080, that matters. So if I register my application with localhost, I want to navigate to localhost here. Just a heads up, because you'll run into weird issues if you mix and match the two. And that's just for dev. Obviously, when you go into production, you're using your real URL. All right. So I'm going to go to portal.azure.com, go to my application registration, which under Azure Active Directory, and I'm using the same application registration I used in other sessions in this series, which is msusdev. I'm going to go ahead and click on that and copy my client ID. And then I'm going to implement this application. So we don't need this index.js script. We have a main class container. This is where we could put our code. So simplest implementation is just to go in and say, let's go pop that script. I'm going to paste my client ID because I won't remember what it is later. We're going to go get that script from npm. Here we go. It says start with this mgt loader from unpackaged.com. If you never used unpackaged.com before, it's basically a really cool CDN. You give it a node package, and it'll give you access to the JavaScript, CSS files, or whatever files you need from within that package. So we're going to do, from Microsoft MGT, we're going to grab the MGT loader.js script, which loads everything in a vanilla JavaScript application. So just jump in, paste that in. And then going back to our browser, it says, okay, now you need to create a MGT MSAL provider. Now they're doing MSAL provider, but I'll do it with MSAL too because I'm living on the wild side. So MGT-MSAL2 provider with a property called client ID. So there's my MSAL2 provider. I'm going to paste in my client ID. And then from there, I can start adding Graph Toolkit components. So I'm going to add my first one. I'm going to just do an MGT login. Hit save. And then if I did everything correctly, there's my application that's already been refreshed, already been updated. Really cool stuff. And just for fun, I'm going to actually just pop this on the left-hand side of my window and code on the right-hand side so you can see me change things in real time. So there it is. There it goes. Pretty cool stuff. You can see I can side in and out, all that. Really, really fun. Okay. Now I can start adding in other components. So for example, if I wanted to do MGT get, just try to remember the way I did it. I'm looking at my notes right now. People are like, where is he looking to? Off to the side, looking at my notes, make sure I don't have any typos. Resource equals me photo $value. I remember that the type equals image. Make sure I don't have any typos. And then I add a template. Image source equals image. Exactly like we did in the Graph Toolkit playground. Save. There's my photo image. This is Bootstrap. Let's see if we can customize this a little bit. So we have, let's see, content images. We can make it responsive. We can create a thumbnail. Let's see, class image thumbnail. Let's try that. Image. Save. Nice little thumbnail border. Okay. We can make it rounded. Let's try that. Rounded image thumbnail. It's okay. Let's see if I can remove that image thumbnail. There we go. My image is a little rounded. Not terribly rounded, but it's something. If anything, just illustrating that we can add these components. We can add in other components. So we can add in stuff like a excuse me. We can add in an MGT tasks component. And I see there's no task assigned to me yet, but notice something. It says, hey, you gave the permission to read your profile, but we now need to access more information. So now it's asking me for permissions to access a new scope. Hit accept. And I'll see that there's really no task assigned to me, so I'll add one. Example task. I'm not gonna bother with any of this. And I can type in other stuff to show you that there's lots of cool things that we can add in here. Now, we can also do, I'm not going to show my agenda, but we can also do that with other different application components. But I think the big thing I wanted to call out here is that just with very little code, I'm already adding Microsoft 365 components to my application. So here's a task component. Or here's a to-do list. And I know that always throws me. It's going to throw you too. Don't worry about it. There's a difference between tasks and to-do items. I can never remember that. We're going to make it read-only. I'm going to hide the header. Let's get that. Here we go. We hide the header, make our to-do list read-only. We'll add a template just like we did earlier. Data type, task. In a template, we'll have an H3, task.title. Save. If we go to Bootstrap, we can add components. So let's add a card for each task. So an example card would be something as simple as card title, card text. Nothing too crazy here. So let's give that a shot. So let's do a card header. All right. And I think I might already have this typed up somewhere. So I'll just copy and paste this because I'm so scared of typos here. All right, let's talk through what we have here. We have a group.title in my card header. In my card body, we have a task.title, and then in the small text in the card, we have the folder title. So if I hit save, we have task creator for Microsoft Graph Explorer. We have all sorts of cool stuff like it. But notice I have my properties wrong. Now, this one I did do on purpose. So how do I find out what my properties really are? Well, two ways. I can go to aka.msge and then pull up the to-do list items. So here's the Graph Explorer. I'll just pull this out, make it full screen. And we could go to to-do list, Microsoft To-Do, get to-do task list. Or we can go in and we can say, here's a to-do task list. Let's copy that. Get items for that to-do task list. So there's a default list. I believe it's items. Just make sure. No, it's not items. For Microsoft To Do task. So there we go. We got to do list task, list, and then list individual. Get to do task resources from a to do task list. Oh, instead of items, it's task. So list / the ID for my list / task. There we go. So this to do task list don't have any tasks. Assign it to Graph Explorer. Assign as myself. I'm gonna get all my to do task lists. I know, super confusing naming, but that's what it is, right? So I'm going to get my to-do task list. I have a list called task default list. Gotta copy this URL. Get the task for that individual list. There we go. Task created for Microsoft Graph Explorer. Complete MSAL GitHub updates. All sorts of cool stuff. Complete YouTube videos. All sorts of cool stuff here. So for each task, we have a status, a title, created date, time, importance, all sorts of cool stuff. So let's do that. Status, title, and importance. So going back to Bootstrap title, we'll put importance up top, task.title, and then task.status at the bottom. Let's try that. There we go. Importance, normal, not started. Oh wow, I really need to get going on some of these tasks. But there's all sorts of cool stuff that we can do just off the vanilla components alone. I saw somebody ask a question. Hey, I was noticing there's a difference between what data you get from version 1.0 and what data you get from the beta endpoints. And sometimes the beta endpoints provide a superset of the data you can get for 1.0. That's true. So a lot of time 1.0 is production. With the beta endpoint, is where they're adding new features and adding more metadata. So there's lots of stuff at the beta endpoint that may not be at the version 1.0 endpoint. So there's nothing wrong, especially with all the SDKs and classes using the beta endpoint if you need to get more data. That doesn't mean it's unsupported. It just means that the team hasn't done a full release of that individual endpoint just quite yet. All right, so we did this all in vanilla JSON, but I want to have some fun. So I'm going to close Visual Studio Code and close my browser, and we are going to, I'm going to just open up Microsoft Explorer, delete everything in that MSAL.js folder. That I closed everything. There we go. The good old node modules folder. It never wants to delete. Make sure. Oh, I have npm start running. In Windows Terminal. All right, there's an MSAL.js folder. It's nice and empty. I'm going to go ahead and just jump in to Windows Terminal. I'm going to create a new React application. So, npx create React app, and then from here, I'm going to create in my current folder. My template is TypeScript because I'm better off at reading TypeScript. And I'm going to use npm for my package manager. So creating a React application is download/mstyle.js folder, all sorts of cool stuff there. It's download everything I need for that. While it's downloading, I'm going to show you a couple cool things. So we saw where we get the MGT package from npm. I'll put that URL in the Q&A. If you want to look at the source code, it's just aka.ms. I believe it's MGT. Now I'll take you to the GitHub repo for the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. I'll put that one in the Q&A. If we go to npmjs.com, we can also look up other MGT packages. So at Microsoft/MGT. You probably saw this a little earlier when I went through it pretty fast. There's all sorts of packages such as the React package, different providers. There's the element class, which is really useful if you're going to do some stuff in like TypeScript and you want to strongly type all your classes. There's the mstyle2 provider, which is the provider we used in the components earlier. One of the cool things is that that loader that we used in the vanilla JavaScript loads everything that you need. But if you need to load it manually, like for instance, we're building a React app, I can install MGT React, MGT Element, so I have access to those base classes for my TypeScript, and then MGT mstyle2 provider. And this will get me everything I need to use this in a React application. So my React application is rolling. I'm going to open this in code. There's my React application. Just close any existing tabs. I'm going to go back in here and let's do npm install at Microsoft, MGT React at Microsoft, MGT mstyle2 provider, and then at Microsoft, MGT element. All of that. That's because of bravery, right? And then once all of that is installed, we basically have our React application for everything we need to get started. You'll see our package.json file. And start adding dependencies in there. Microsoft MGT element, mstyle2 provider, React. Everything's installed. So I should just be able to do npm start. And it'll kick up everything I need in the current browser. There's our development server, and it's going to, again, automatically update anytime we have changes. So here we go, localhost port 3000. There's our React application. I'm going to do the same thing we did last time, which is pop this on the left and pop our Visual Studio Code editor on the right. So I want to get started with Microsoft Graph Toolkit. If I go to source, I have my app.tsx, which is just this application. It's only a single TypeScript file right now. And then our index.tsx, which includes our configuration. So from here, I'm going to import the stuff I need. So I'm going to import our providers from Microsoft MGT element. And then I'm going to import specifically the mstyle2 provider from Microsoft MGT mstyle2 provider. And again, if I'm not doing TypeScript, I don't need like the MGT element. I'm only using that because I want to strongly type everything. So I should be able to say providers.global provider. This sets the global provider for all Microsoft Graph Toolkit components in this React application. Obviously, if you don't want to set a global provider, you can configure differently. So we're going to set our global provider to a new mstyle2 provider. And then we'll provide a configuration object. So we need two things, client ID, it is scopes, which is an array. Today we'll just do user.read. For my client ID, we're going to go back to the actual portal, grab my client ID, and pop that in. That's the configuration. We're now configured to use the Graph Toolkit components. So save the changes. You notice nothing really changed with the app. Let's go in and the made element. All right, save. If it did everything correctly, it should just automatically refresh. Make sure logo is defined but never used. Oh, good old compilation warnings. I don't care about any of that. Save. All right, let's do a login component. Now it's gonna say login is not defined. Okay, let's fix that. Import login from Microsoft MGT React. Save it. Make sure I didn't mess anything up. It's compiling. It's thinking. There's my login component. All right. All right. Let's put a horizontal rule. After my login component, let's put a person component. Person query equals me. View equals, well, no, let's just start with person component. Save it. Need to import that. There's my person component. It looks like it's avatar view. So we'll create a const view equals, and this is where we can pull in a person view type. Person view type dot 3 lines. All right. View equals view. Save. There we go. 2 lines. All right. It's 2 lines. Sorry. There we go. Person view type dot 1 line. And not 3 lines. Really cool stuff. I can make this really complex really fast. For example, I have my person element. Maybe I want to do a to-do list underneath that. So to do. Now I need to import that. And there's my to-do list. Notice it's editable. I should be able to just make it read only. So let's see. Read only. There we go. Hide header. Hide options. Sweet. Leave it a hide header. Let's say I want to do a template. I can create an item template. I need to now item template is really interesting because I need to create something for item template. So I'm going to go in and create a new constant, call it my item template. And what is it? Well, it's going to be props of type MGT template props. Now notice Visual Studio Code's really cool. It already added the import for me. So that makes my life a whole lot easier. Lambda function. Let's go get props.data context, and we're going to save it in a constant called task. This gives us, well, we're really extracting the task property from data context. So then we should be able to do some really cool stuff. Like for instance, I can create a P element. Within there, put in JSON.stringify and pass in my task. I'll just double check it, make sure I didn't get any typos in here. Return. What am I missing here? Props. Why am I getting red squigglies? JSON. Just hang with me right here. I'm just double checking my spelling. Oh, this is supposed to be parentheses. No, it's that curly braces. Can you tell I kind of flip between .NET JavaScript a lot, and so I trip up over like little syntactical things. All right, so if I got this right, I should just be able to pass this my item template here, and then template for a type task. Save. And there's our JSON data. Lots of interesting properties here. Last modified date time, created date time, ID, body, all sorts of cool stuff. Let's play around with this some more. So we're going to take this and I'm going to just build it out a little bit. So maybe for we'll create list group items. So instead of a P element, we'll create a label. And this is we're still using Bootstrap, so we can use some of their classes. So class name equals list group item. And then within there, we'll create an input. Class name equals form check input. ME1 type checkbox. And I'm not going to set the value to anything, just keep it simple today. And then in there, I'll just put task.title. If it, and now we have a checkbox list of all the tasks I have ready to do. And I'm not implementing any actions or anything like that right now, but really wanted to show was that we can customize a lot of these components, use them immediately in our vanilla JavaScript applications, use them in our React applications, and really build out some really interesting integrated solutions. So I shared a lot today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post this slide right back real quick. If you got any questions, need help with this series, can't find session number 1. It's on youtube.com/Microsoft Dev Radio, by the way, the first session in this series. MSUSDev or Microsoft.com. That's where you should email us. We're happy to answer questions. I'm pretty sure, I think I looked and I have one more question that I need to get an answer to that we've been going back and forth with somebody on. So we always try to help, and if we can't help, we escalate it to somebody who can. Our demo source code available online. If you look at the Q&A panel, github.com/MSUSDev, Microsoft Identity Platform Dev, you'll see that all of the slides and demos I've done today, source code is all available there. So I want to thank everybody for attending. We had some really good questions today. Lots of links we put in the Q&A, and we hope to see you at our next session, which will be the 3rd session, authenticating to Azure services by Insight.js. We will use Insight.js to authenticate to various data services in Azure. Somebody say YouTube, how do we get to the videos for the first session of the series? That's youtube.com/Microsoft Dev Radio. That's one word. You'll see under the videos list, we have a video called Authenticating Users in JavaScript Apps. You should be able to jump right on over to that. So again, thanks everybody, and I'll hand it right back to Matt.
Hey, thank you so much, Sydney. I'll go ahead and put the link directly to that video right into the chat, and hope to see everyone next week. And hopefully the improvised demo will work next week. So thanks so much, everybody.